Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Hey, welcome back. Good to be with you here, episode number 29 of Weather Weekly. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey with Wish TV in Indianapolis, and it's always a pleasure to be hanging out with you. Got a good one here for today. We're going to spend some time talking about what was just a mammoth hurricane, because there's a lot to dissect here and there's a lot fresh in my mind, so I kind of want to just jump into it here. Ida made landfall over the weekend in Louisiana, category 4 powerhouse storm, borderline category 5, just a massive beast of a storm. But you know, there's still, as we're recording this here on Monday, they're still kind of cleaning up the damage here. So we're kind of assessing everything. So I want to get to that. I don't want to spend too much time here in the intro here. We'll spend the bulk of the podcast time talking about Ida. But man, what a beast of a storm. Quick weather headlines locally. Finally got some rain. Finally. We had some kind of spotty downpours the last several days. But finally, we've got a cold front that's kind of coming through to kick off this week as we're wrapping up the month of August here on Monday and Tuesday, and we head into the opening of September on Wednesday. We got a cold front that's moving through, and that is triggering showers and thunderstorms, and that cold front is actually stalling out a bit thanks to Ida making landfall in the Gulf. So it's providing us with some really good rain chances now that we're putting the end in the wraps of the month up here of August. And again, these numbers will probably change, and so we'll give you another update next week on the podcast when we kind of look ahead, as we usually do in the beginning of the month, to looking ahead to September. Precip wise, again, not factoring in what we may pick up Monday or Tuesday when it's all said and done, 29th driest leading up to the 30th here. We had 1 3/4 inches. It was really dry, really dry, and really we were lucky to even get that much. It took a while just to even get there. It is the driest since 2015. We had about 1.5 inches in 2015. So, yeah, it's been kind of a long time coming there. In terms of temperatures, this will come to a surprise to no one. Boy, did we finish strong. And again, not factoring in the last 2 days here, the mean average temperature, 77.7. That is good for 11th hottest for the month of August. It is the hottest since 2016. We were at 78.2 that year. The hottest is 1936. 80.5 was our average temperature that year. So kind of thing, you know, winding things down here for the month of August. Typically kind of a warmer and drier month, if you will. So, you know, it kind of held serve there. For this month, we did kind of tap into some rain a little bit. Otherwise, this was going to be an exceptionally dry August, and it was very toasty. Man, we had 17 days total of 90-degree heat, the bulk of which, that's for the entire summer. The bulk of those days happen in the month of August. Coming into August, I don't even know if we were halfway home. So half of those days, over half those days, likely were in the month of August. We had a pretty long stretch of pretty high heat. Obviously, the big national headline is Ida. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We will talk more about Ida here in the main part of this podcast, because there is a lot to dissect here. Nationally speaking, you still have the wildfires out west. They're not doing a great job of being able to contain that. Weather has not been cooperating much as we kind of roll through this week. This is a very typical dry time. This is getting into the wildfire season for our friends in the Pacific Northwest and along the Pacific coast in general. So kind of having a rough go of it. Several wildfires still going on. Outside of Ida that made landfall on Sunday, we now have Kate that has formed in the Atlantic. That is likely to stay well east of the United States. In fact, even well east of Bermuda. So it's way out there. And likely stays as a tropical storm as it rolls, kind of wobbles north through the rest of the week and then heading into the weekend. There is a wave coming off the coast of Africa. It has a 70% chance of formation over the next 48 hours. So we'll see how that one holds as we continue to ramp up the activity in the tropics. Obviously quite active here with several named storms over the last couple of weeks. And now we get into September and October. We're kind of getting on the tail end of the peak part of the year. This is when you will see several of these storms kind of forming in the Gulf. And so that's, again, those are the areas that have been hit the hardest so far this hurricane season has been along the Gulf. So now it's still kind of prime time for them as we go over the next couple of months. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about Hurricane Ida, historical in many ways and comparable to probably the benchmark hurricane that's hit Louisiana. That's Katrina, which ironically, they land on the same date, 16 years apart. We're going to talk much more about Hurricane Ida and the cleanup that's going on along the Louisiana coast. That's coming up next on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
All right, episode number 29 of Weather Weekly. Good to be with you here. And we're going to spend the entire time here chatting about Ida. Ida was a fascinating system that made landfall on Sunday. So that was August 29th. That's an important date. And I'll talk about that in a second here. But August 29th, it was close to noon Eastern, noon Central Time, so local time, 1 p.m. 1 p.m. Eastern Time, when Ida made landfall. Did make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane, 150 mile per hour sustained winds. One of the stronger hurricanes in Louisiana's history. And they've had their fair share of pretty strong storms. And I mentioned August 29th as being an important date. Of course, August 29th this year, we're remembering the 16-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina making its landfall in Louisiana. Of course, it made landfall over Florida, too. Katrina was just an unbelievable storm. This date is interesting. Isaac also made landfall as a Category 1 storm on this date, and I want to say it's maybe give or take 15 to 20 miles between all three of those storms, all on the same date in Louisiana. Obviously, all of them doing some damage. Katrina was a little bit more catastrophic, obviously. And that's going to be the benchmark for a long time for Louisiana. But I will say this, there are other mitigating factors, but I think if you don't have Katrina at that magnitude, you possibly could have had a worst case scenario with Ida making landfall. And I'll kind of explain why I say that here. I always find it fascinating because anytime we talk hurricanes, and we talked strongest, people are always amazed for the fact that there's only been 4 Category 5 hurricanes that have made landfall in the continental United States. Only 4. We almost had our 5th this weekend. It was very, very close. 150 mile per hour winds when Ida made landfall. And that thing, from what we were looking at, it was continuing to strengthen. It was not maintaining. It was not weakening. It looked like it was kind of going through eye wall replacement. And so sometimes you see kind of a brief weakening and then it juices back up. That eye wall will really kind of strengthen itself again. We saw that early Sunday morning when it jumped from basically a category 2 to essentially nearly a category 5. 157 is the number it needed to reach to get category 5. It was at 150 when it made landfall. So it was close. And we did see wind gusts as high as 172 at landfall. So, but here's, and obviously, especially for people that are in Louisiana, but I think, anybody that has paid attention to weather and has, been around the last 16 years, that a lot of these storms that are going to be coming up the Gulf Coast, specifically around New Orleans, is going to be compared to Katrina. Katrina was a beast of a storm, right? It was a category 5 storm at one time. Before it actually was downgraded as it approached Louisiana and Mississippi as a Category 3 storm. But it was a bit stronger in terms of the pressure, right? You judge it in millibars. It was lower at the time of landfall compared to Ida. Ida had stronger winds. Katrina had lower pressure. And I'll explain why that's important here. So Katrina is always going to be a headline, even though, getting back to my point, that people are always shocked that Katrina was not a category 5 storm, nor is it considered the strongest hurricane on record. It is one of the most destructive hurricanes. No question about that. In fact, it's not even close. Okay? The problem was it wasn't strictly just hurricane related, although this caused it. It was the extreme failures of the levee system in New Orleans in 2005 that made that a huge story. Okay? Part of that was because you had significant storm surge along the coast, the Gulf Coast here, when Katrina came in. But something you need to keep in mind here is that New Orleans sits below sea level. If you've never been, they don't bury their dead underground. They're above ground. So they are below sea level. So you have to kind of envision New Orleans basically sits in kind of like the bottom of a cereal bowl, surrounded by a massive lake to the north, and then marsh basically to the south, and the Mississippi River is almost at its widest, passing through New Orleans as it kind of reaches its mouth to dump out into the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so with Katrina, obviously, the city of New Orleans was not prepared for something like that. The thing about Katrina was it wasn't I wouldn't call it a direct hit, right? Direct hit was for New Orleans almost what happened with Ida yesterday. If you want to envision this here, I know the hurricanes are probably more thought of as kind of circular, but if you break it down in like across, right? So you break it into 4 squares. The top right, or what we would call the northeast quadrant, is always the strongest part of that storm. There's more surge, there's more wind, and that's where you can get tornadic activity as well. You can get tornadic activity mainly on the whole eastern side of a hurricane, but that top quadrant, top right quadrant, or northeast quadrant, if you will, that's the one that's going to have the biggest brunt of the storm surge, the wind, and the tornadic threats, okay? In Katrina was supposed to be Biloxi's storm. That was going to be kind of ground zero for the worst of the devastation. And Biloxi took a massive hit massive hit by Katrina. But it ended up being such a secondary story. It would have been the headline if the levees don't fail in New Orleans. 50 failures of levees and flood walls that protect the city failed. And so that's what ended up happening. 80% of New Orleans and all of St. Bernard Parish was basically underwater. So this is going through just kind of the timeline for Katrina. Tens of billions of gallons of water spilled into vast areas of New Orleans, flooding over 100,000 homes and businesses. Responsibility for the design and construction of the levee system belongs to the United States Army Corps of Engineers. They are also responsible for maintenance of the upkeep of the levees. And here's the thing, when Katrina struck on August 29th, 2005, the project was between 60 and 90% complete, so it wasn't even really done. There was 3 major breaches that occurred that really kind of caused the problems. One on the northeast side near the junction with Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, and 2 on the southeast side along the lower Ninth Ward, which we know to be pretty much ground zero of all the devastation with the levee failure in New Orleans due to Katrina, was in that lower Ninth Ward. And a lot of people still have not returned to that area even 16 years later. So, that was the biggest problem. You did have some significant storm surge, and a big reason for that was the pressure was lower. The pressure was lower with Katrina, and that will help bring up some of that storm surge more than Ida. Ida still had some very low pressure. It had some very strong winds to go along with it, and so it was able to push in that water. But I think the huge difference here compared from Katrina to what happened this weekend was obviously New Orleans, after the tragedy that happened in 2005 with Katrina. They were super prepared. In fact, a lot of the press conferences that I watched, the gentleman, I can't remember his name, forgive me, but the one that would come up and speak with the mayor said several times, he goes, we're not hopeful, we are extremely confident, to the point that we're not even worried that the levees are going to hold. They had built those for 20-foot storm surges, so you're talking like biblical storm that would be needed to breach those levees in New Orleans. Now, is it a perfect system? No. And what they said, and this will always be kind of a concern when now you get hurricanes. The levees look like they held up. Obviously, the coastal areas of Louisiana are kind of hit. I think it's Grand Isle that was almost kind of ground zero for Ida on Sunday afternoon. But you will always run into the problem of New Orleans being below sea level. And if you're going to get heavy rain, which is what they anticipated, and I saw rainfall estimates around 9 to 10 inches of rain, you're going to deal with some flooding in New Orleans. It's just going to happen because you are, again, below sea level. And if you are getting 2 to 3 inches of rain per hour, even in a city like Indianapolis that could drain okay, it's going to have a tough time keeping up. So you can only imagine in New Orleans, when you're below sea level, it's going to have a really, really tough time keeping up. That said, they fought that on, and there's just basically some standing water in spots. No one has had to been rescued in the city of New Orleans specifically. Now, I know there are other areas and other parishes where levees maybe didn't handle quite as well, that, they needed to evacuate there. But in New Orleans specifically, there were no water rescues or anything like that, okay? What it appeared to be was mainly a wind-driven event. It was and still is, it looks like, that the wind was really the culprit for a lot of the damage and the destruction along Louisiana's coast, especially in New Orleans. The entire city at one point was completely in the dark, and really all of southeastern Louisiana. In fact, as I'm looking at this here, and I'm recording this, less than or a little more than 24 hours after landfall here. But just last check, there is just over 1 million customers in Louisiana that are without power right now. Obviously, I think it's Jefferson is what New Orleans is, the parish that they are located in. They're almost to 200,000 without power. So quite a few people there. So that ended up being kind of the big story, and I think that's going to be kind of the story going forward, is the cleanup due to the winds. I mentioned that it was 150 mile per hour sustained winds when Ida made landfall, but you did have gusts up to 172. There were reports of towns west of New Orleans, and how in the world these reporting stations were able to withstand this. But I saw numerous reports on social media of some of these reporting stations going for about 5 hours straight of 100 mile per hour sustained winds. So pretty exceptional winds for a long duration of time. I think another impressive thing about this storm, too, was so this makes landfall at noon Central Daylight Time, or it was around that time. And I remember going to bed. I was watching coverage from WWL. They were streaming on YouTube, not YouTube TV, but just generic YouTube. They had a live stream going on, and it was great coverage. Good mix of reporters in the field, anchors interviewing emergency management personnel, meteorologists doing their thing in terms of forecasting and kind of the current conditions, where this is headed, if they're in the worst of it yet, when is it going to get worse, when is it going to get better, et cetera. So I kind of stayed up as late as I could for a guy that wakes up at 1 in the morning. I think I stayed up until around 8. I stayed up till around 8 p.m. watching the coverage, and they were still in the meat of this. When I woke up at 1, so this was 12 hours into the event. It was downgraded to a Category 2, but you have to realize that is 12 hours that this officially had made landfall, and that it was still considered a hurricane. When we went on the air at 4 a.m., it was still a Category 1 storm. I think that was the case. So I think it was about 17 hours from landfall to finally when it was downgraded to a tropical storm. So that's a couple of things here. One, if you're not real familiar with Louisiana, right along that southern coast is very marshy, and there is a lot of water in and around New Orleans. So a hurricane essentially could still feed off that moisture, okay? 2, it also goes to show how strong this storm was. It did slow down as it was making landfall, but we also feel, just by looking at how things were going, as it was approaching landfall, we feel that was strengthening it was making kind of a last push to maybe get up to Category 5 strength before it made landfall. Thankfully, it did not. I mean, it still did its destruction. That, I think, was really, really impressive there. So now as we speak here, I'm recording this here late afternoon on Monday, the day after, so about a little more than 24 hours after the event. Most of the rain is out of Louisiana. In fact, the last press conference I saw, they had the sunshine out. They were outside. Still a little breezy, but most of the trouble has been kind of moved to Mississippi and Alabama, and they're dealing with some of that heavy rain as we speak. But just an incredible storm. But you're always going to get the comparisons to Katrina. And I think, maybe we'll have a podcast coming up here, maybe in a couple of weeks when we kind of quiet things down. And I think we could spend a whole podcast on Katrina and just the failures that happened. But I think the lessons that were learned from that day and probably what made, this weekend, this event here maybe a little bit more successful because of what they learned from Katrina 16 years ago, because this had all the makings for a devastating hurricane for New Orleans. They're in the crosshairs of that right front quadrant where the storm surge is higher, where the winds are higher. And New Orleans was able to, take it on the chin a little bit. There was a lot of wind damage. There was some flooding, but obviously nothing like what they had to deal with 16 years ago to that date. So some good news there. All right, we'll look ahead to your work week forecast that's coming up next here on Weather Weekly. Here's a look at your forecast as we head into the first week of September. This will drop on September 1st. And hey, you know what? We deserve this. Very quiet weather here for the rest of the week with lots of sunshine. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, highs in the upper 70s to around 80. That is below average for this time of year. And the holiday weekend, pretty nice as well. I think we're a touch warmer. We are looking at lower 80s for Saturday, mid 80s for Sunday, and Labor Day next Monday. And all of those days I have dry. There are some hints, especially I think the GFS model was hinting at maybe a few showers for the weekend. Euro was not seeing that at all. And the Canadian, I think, was keeping things pretty quiet too. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? We'll see as we get a little bit closer. But it looks like right now we can prep for a pretty nice holiday weekend and really just this nice stretch here over the coming days. 6 to 10 day outlook, temperatures right around normal, precip also right around normal, and 8 to 14 day outlook, which will take us to the middle of the month. Below average temperatures, normal high for early September, right around 80 or in the upper 70s, and above average precip. And going ahead and looking at the month of September outlook, equal chance for above or below average temperatures, and it does look like it could be a little wetter. Average precip above average as we go through the month of September. So there you go. Things are getting a little quieter and a little more comfortable. And you know what? I'm ready for it. Football season is kicking off. My Ball State Cardinals will be kicking off their season here. Hopefully just as successful as last year, winning the MAC championship and their bowl game. They'll be kicking off on Thursday. So that'll be exciting, and hopefully we'll get things started. Everybody else, we got Purdue, IU, Notre Dame. A lot of people are going to be kicking off either this weekend or next week. And then, of course, NFL will be kicking off the weekend after Labor Day weekend. So, man, here we go. Getting ready for football season. Love it. And hopefully the weather cooperates as well. It's going to be feeling pretty nice if you're going to be heading out to any tailgating here for any of the college or high school games. Week number 3 of high school football. Can't forget them. It's been pretty nice weather so far. A little bit on the hot side. Should be a little more comfortable here this week and beyond. All right, next week we're going to be talking about looking ahead to the month of September, what you can expect weather-wise. We are getting much, much closer, of course, to the fall season here. And we'll be talking about some of those changes that are going to be heading our way as well. And while you are here, we'd love for you to check out any of our other great podcasts. You can check them out anytime on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And of course, we'd love to hear your feedback as well. Shoot me an email, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com, or social media at Marcus Bailey on Twitter and Instagram, and Marcus Bailey Weather on Facebook. That'll get you to me if you have any suggestions, comments, concerns, complaints, all that fun stuff. So hit me up. Love to hear your ideas as we are moving forward. Next week will be episode number 30. We hope to listen to you again next week as we kick off the month of September on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com, and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.